All right, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Thanks for joining our webinar covering ACH fraud and Nacha rule updates for 2026. We'll first go through some housekeeping items and introductions, and then we'll have our webinar starting with Pierre on strategic moves and new rules, followed by Yongqing on a solution demo. This webinar will be recorded. A link to the recording will be sent to everyone in attendance. We will have the ability to receive questions throughout this webinar, but we won't have time to answer those all live. So please be sure to submit your questions. There's a Q&A section on the platform, and we'll be sure to follow up with any questions that you had at the end of the webinar. And now I'll hand it over to our speakers, Yongqing.
Sure. Thank you, Josh. Hi, everyone. My name is Yongsheng, and I'm currently holding a senior product manager role at DataVisor. I have had almost 2 decades of experience in fraud and risk, in product management, and also in data science. Currently, I'm spearheading the efforts to build out the solutions for banking. Very happy to be here and pass on to my colleague, Pierre.
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. And hi, everyone. My name is Pierre Eisensee. I am a principal solution consultant here at DataVisor. I've been with DataVisor for about a year and a half altogether. Altogether, also roughly about 20 years altogether in the AML and fraud space, 15 of those years at Fiserv as both a product manager and business consultant, and a couple of years at FICO working as a business consultant on their global business consulting team on fraud. So Josh, maybe we can start our webinar off with a poll. And our poll, we just want to take a look to see how everybody feels, if they're ready for the 26 Nacha rule changes. And let's take a look to see how everybody feels about how their readiness. All right. Well, we've got, I think, actually the majority of the folks who answer the poll looks like they feel that they're not ready. So that's good that they've joined our webinar today. We've got a lot of good content in terms of the changes that are coming about, why the changes are happening, the things to look out for, and also we're going to do more of a deeper dive into our solution and how that can help you get even more ready for the Nacha changes. So with that, Josh, maybe we could just move on to the next slide. And so when we take a look at why Nacha is making these changes, if we look at the the ACH payment landscape, we see that there's roughly about $93 trillion of payments across the ACH network, and that what we're seeing is roughly about $2 billion in losses, or representing 9% of total fraud losses, which is quite considerable. What really Nacha is trying to achieve here is to address the losses associated with ACH transactions and ultimately protect their network along with their customers. Josh, can we get to the next slide, please? All right. So what are the key changes making in these rules? When we look at there's really two major themes that are within the 2026 rule changes. First of all, there is a mandatory risk-based fraud monitoring. So it's no longer just sufficient to process the files and track the return rates. Nacha is also expecting you to monitor for both unauthorized, but also entries initiated under false pretenses. So that is not only sort of the account takeovers, what they're expecting you to take a look at, but also potentially for scam activity. So that's quite new, and it's also a very interesting aspect of the new changes that we cover both. We cover both of those aspects within our solution. And the second major point of that is a move to cleaner data standards via standardized company entry descriptions, payroll versus purchase, which makes it easier to distinguish wage payments from e-commerce flows and apply the right risk strategies to each. Maybe Josh, we go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So just a quick timeline on what we have here in terms of the changes, what's in scope. The initial phase of this Nacha has spread these over several milestones, a couple which have already passed. The first milestone was all about response pool. That was in April of 2025, which really focuses on better communications on return requests. The phase one, which has actually occurred a couple of days ago, it really targets larger originators and RDFIs based upon 2023 volumes, which really requires them to implement fraud monitoring and use the payroll purchase descriptions, which I mentioned in the previous slide. Lastly, by June of 2026, all the obligations extend to all non-consumer originators, that's TSPs, RDFIs. So really, at that point, everybody should be monitoring for the fraudulent activity and not just simply processing the files. And Josh, maybe the next slide. Thank you. Yep. So what are the characteristics of ACH that really make them attractive to fraudsters? Firstly, ACHs in general, they require less information than other payment methods. ACH transactions really rely mainly on routing and account numbers. And that's quite less information as compared to other payment methods. Secondly, ACHs, because of in general that they can take a couple days to settle, that allows the gap really allows the fraudsters to kite funds between banks. And lastly, ACH in general have less metadata than for other payment forms. If we think about like for other types of like cards or things like that, or taps of the cards and stuff like that, that there's a lot more additional data around those payments, which help in the detection of fraud as compared to ACHs. Josh, if we can go to the next one. So how do we think about taking a look and responding strategically rather than just turning up to looking at the noise on the alerts? First of all, you really want to take a look at device and behavioral intelligence, and having that at the center of your fraud strategy to really help you with better detection of account takeovers. Secondly, we would emphasize, having a 360 view across the different rails. So it's not just ACH, but you can see different types of activity associated with that customer, rather than just solely as a silo for ACH transactions. And then next, we would say, moving from a tribal silo sort of rules to codified best practice ACH playbooks to things like ATO kiting, payroll diversion, and mule flows. Next, we would say, really leverage consortium data so that you're having an understanding of potential rings that are having at other institutions. And lastly, putting AI to use for fraud operations in terms of tuning the rules, helping you to prioritize, the alerts into different queues, and also just for helping in the process of triaging of those alerts. Josh, if we can go to the next one, please. Yep. So what is our solution really based upon? And that's on a number of different, 4 different real pillars. First of all, we offer end-to-end out-of-the-box rules and strategies, which give you Nacha aligned monitoring program from day one, covering all the different ACH fraud vectors. We'll get into more of those details in just a minute. Advanced signals around from behavioral intelligence, which helps you to pick up on ATOs and login scams and things like that. And then also consortium data, which helps you with unsupervised ring detection, helps you see risk of counterparties and mule clusters that your institution would never spot. And lastly, agentic AI, which helps for the dynamic tuning of your rules and help you also with the review of the alerts that get created, which helps to reduce then a lot of that manual workload and reducing the false positives. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Yongjin, and she's going to walk you a little bit more in depth in the different types of way that we look at the fraud for ACHs, and then give you a demo of how our platform works.
Thank you, Pierre. So here we're looking at a very simplified ACH fraud taxonomy. We roughly divide the ACH fraud to 2 categories: new account fraud and existing account fraud. In new account fraud, the fraudulent accounts are born bad. So those are typically the first party fraud. Under there, we see kiting, we see accounts with stolen identity, and then we also see mule accounts created to just funnel funds. Under existing account, however, the majority portion over here is on the victim side, right? We have account takeover problem, we have scam problem, and internal fraud problem to detect. And then over there, it can be roughly divided into two more categories. One is unauthorized transactions, which is experienced after account takeover, and then scam and internal fraud, which are more on the authorized side. The victims just are tricked into doing something according to fraudster's instruction. Next slide, please. And since now Nacha is requiring us to have a mandatory monitoring program for both of the unauthorized and authorized, here I want to kind of call out the major differences between these two and what we can do, what type of risk signals we can derive to detect them. Although account takeover problem is also a hard problem, but I would say compared to the scam detection, it is a relatively easier problem. So on the left-hand side, we are listing the top risk signals you can leverage for detecting account takeover. So beyond the digital signals, for example, is this customer on a brand new device? What about the ISP, right? What about IP country? Is it brand new, right? And then you can look at the logging anomalies. Are there many repeated logging attempts with failed attempts? What about the profile changes, right? Has there any be a change of address or phone number or email before the transaction? And external linkage, right? Before the transaction, do you see an external account getting added to the customer's profile? And the last three signals, the new recipient, risky recipient, and then volume value behavior change, are signals that you can leverage for the scam detection as well. So you see that scam detection is a lot thinner, right? There are less signals you can exploit from the customer side. That's why the risky recipient detection is very critical for the scam detection. So how we'll talk about how to look at that, what kind of dimensions you can look at when coming up with like a recipient trust score. But here, I also want to mention that for scam and internal fraud for ACH, there's something extra we can leverage, especially around the receiver name. So if you think about the scam, let's take a fake invoice or utility scam as example. The fraudster is trying to impersonate someone, right? And then the recipient, the receiver name is going to look like the impersonated party. However, the real account is not under their name. So if you can leverage, if you can find data points in your data that could indicate that receiver name impersonation, it will be a plus. Sometimes, if the receiver is at the counterparty institution side, you may not directly have the receiver name on the profile, right? So over there, you may need to use a third-party vendor signal to tell you whether this is a match or no match. For internal fraud, something else you can leverage is that if you group by the same receiver name and try to detect account number change for the same receiver name, that's also a good signal that you can leverage to detect internal fraud. Next slide, please. Okay, so we talked about the importance of a recipient trust score, and this is one of the assets that our out-of-the-box solution also have. It automatically derives for you. So a trust score can help you do two things. It can flag anomaly. It can also try help you to reduce the false positives, right? So on the left-hand side, if I have let's say the sender A and the recipient 1 has an established previous transaction history many times, right? No bad signals from that relationship, then it is very trustworthy, right? You can probably just let go of this transaction. Or another signal we can leverage is although this sender is, let's say sender B is sending to recipient 1 for the first time, However, recipient one has a very established history. It is, let's say, a business recipient, right? And it has a very low return rate and never had any fraud with it. So even if it's a brand new transaction relationship between B and recipient one, you probably also want to let it go, right? So that's the good side. On the right-hand side, what could hurt a recipient trust score? For example, this recipient's never even occurred to your financial institution before. It's a brand new recipient to the FI entirely. Then it is you want to take away some score right from it. Or let's say it has a previous high risk return rate or previous ACH fraud reported on this recipient too. You may also want to take away the scores. Other things, for example, this transaction in particular has a large amount, or it's a crypto transaction, or the destination has high risk. You also will want to reduce the trust score. So that's like the main idea of our trust score, recipient trust score in the solution. And it is very important for scam detection. Go on to the next slide, please. Before I demo the overall out-of-the-box strategy, let's talk about a little bit about account segmentation. It is crucial for pretty much any detection strategy, I would say, because different type of accounts could benefit from different type of signals, and it's not like all the signals are applicable for every single account, right? So we used account tenure and recent account activity to divide accounts into 5 segments: new, nearly new, recurring, established, and dormant. And it is just very straightforward, right? Because, for example, account behavior change or customer behavior change can only be applied for accounts that have history, not really toward a brand new account. So that's the logic behind it. So moving on to the next slide. Now, Josh, if you could stop share, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to take you through our out-of-the-box detection strategy for the ACH solution. Okay. So as Pierre said, that we have 4 pillars that when we angle toward the out-of-the-box solution. And here, because of limitation of the time, I'm only showing you 1 pillar, which is out-of-the-box detection strategy. And this is our detection, the decision flow for detecting the ACH fraud. And it is very small, so I'm going to first give you like a top-down kind of flavor. What is the major kind of the block chunk of things doing? And then we'll dive deeper into box by box and watch out for the time as well. And we'll see how much we can cover today. And so first, we will record the customer and counterparty information into lists. Let me make it a little bit bigger. And then we'll have a whitelist slash alert suppression mechanism going on in here, like we talked about the known counterparty and customer, right? Then we want to suppress, we want to shortlist it and go to the end without too much scrutiny. So this is that, and we will have a block list strategy here that you can leverage day 1. And then we have a generic scorecard that provide you the ACH risk signal in terms of a score. And we have the return patterns, basically a set of rules that could put transaction into the review queue based on their return. And we have then the business or personal breakout, the segmentation. Personal have their own strategy, personal accounts versus the business side. We have individual rules in here to flag ACH fraud and put them into the queue, as well as segmented scorecards. So we have 4 scorecards, and for the personal versus business, and the newer accounts versus more established accounts. And finally, we have a placeholder for the MFA integration. So because in here, if the scores are high enough, they will be put into review queue. But if the score is pretty high, but not high enough to deserve a review, then we could also set something up to send SMS to the customer for them to give back the signal. So that's a high level. And now I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into each box. So here are the recording the first scene and last scene of a customer and counterparty relationship, which is very critical. So if we zoom into this last scene, so recording the last scene. So what we do is we record the risk last scene, basically the return happening for the customer and counterparty. And then the last scene of that transaction, the profile, this one is account segmentation. So the table that I talked about that put accounts into 5 category, it gets dynamically updated whenever a new transaction is happening. So that is updating that segment. And we also want to record every single fraud reported on customer and counterparty. So that's that. Okay, so let me close out this window. So after that, we would do a allowed listing. So in the allowed listing, we support whitelisting. So typical whitelisting style, the allowed listing, as well as 2 out-of-the-box strategies for the known counterparty and customer. And it looks at not just the previous counterparty and customer transaction pair, but also how much return that we have, how much fraud we have seen. It has to be 0 in order for the suppression to kick in. Okay. And trusted company and also a default rule to suppress previous alerts. So if you have a high alert volume issue, you can leverage that to reduce the volume as well. So that's allowed listing. And then we're moving on to block listing strategy. So we have 11 default rules set up, configured out of the box, different angles, right? IP, account number, country, routing number, the counterparty's routing number, because sometimes the institution itself is very, very bad reputation. So you probably want to have that strategy handy as well. Email domain, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that's the block listing. So if anything is block listed, it can also be shortcutted and directly go to put things into the review queue or be rejected. So it's out of the box configuration, but it's configurable according to your risk appetite and strategy customization. All right, so we talked about the block listing, and now we are at the default strategies that can apply to all the accounts. So this box is about the default, the generic fraud pattern signals. We have a scorecard which has 41 different risk dimensions. And each of them, if they're hit, they will add some risk score toward the final risk scorecard. So let's take a look how they look like. So we have 41 total, and these signals are applicable like rapid money in and out. Oops. Can you still hear me? Hello?
You're all good, Youngching.
Okay, because something just snapped on my end, just to make sure. All right, cool. So these signals are applicable to all the accounts, like rapid money in and out, international ACH, SEC code mismatch, and it should be a business, but then it's a business transaction happening on a personal account, for example, same day ACH, so on and so forth, right? I'm not gonna, you know, talk to the every single rule here, but you get the idea. And then we have like a rapid scaling type of rules. Basically, all the signals, if it's applicable to all the accounts, then we put it in this scorecard. And we also have the summation rule basically tells us what to do with the score after it's computed. Here it's configured to be if it's a high score, meaning above 0.6, we are putting into the review queue, ACH review queue. But again, it's customizable, so it can be modified upon onboarding. And we have a return rule set focusing on the high-risk returns. And when the return's happening, you may want to review it and look into the account to see if there's something wrong with the account that you want to further kind of investigate. So that is the generic one. And then we do a segmentation into personal versus business. So each of these boxes have a set of individual rules as detectors. And in here, we can find our scam detection friend. So the ACH scam victim is in here, personal. And as you see in here, the recipient trust score is leveraged in the rule. Okay. And then since we only have 4 minutes left, I'm going to speed up a little bit and take you through one of the internal fraud rules and look at the one of the signal that I talked about here. So in the internal fraud rule, here we are trying to detect the sender, basically the authorizing side. And so here you can group by, so this feature basically it's grouping by the account receiving name for 90-day and trying to distinct count the counterparty account number under the same receiver name. Okay. So that gives you the flavor of how we leverage that signal in our out-of-the-box strategy for that problem. Okay, moving forward. So these two boxes are the individual rules as detectors. And then we go forward to like a segmented scorecard. So we talked about generic scorecard, the risk scores that are applicable to everybody. Now it's broken out into 4 segments, personal and business, newer and older. And over there we have, so there are 2 things to consider. One is you may have a same style rule, but you want to apply different threshold for business versus personal, let's say. For example, device velocity, right? While personal account, we shouldn't expect too many devices to be logging into the account. It might be normal for business. So you may want to have a different threshold for the same rule idea. And there are that's one thing. The other thing is you may have brand new, different like ideas that's only applicable for one segment. So you want to hold them in a specific one. So that's like the idea of the segmented scorecard. And it continued to add score to the previous risk score to come to a final score and see whether this is above the threshold. If so, put things into the review. And here it's a placeholder for the MFA integration for sending out the SMS. So that's pretty much the ACH out-of-the-box solution for ACH that we currently offer. And I think we are pretty good in terms of time. I want to say this flow is pretty comprehensive. I didn't have time to demo the out-of-the-box case management configuration, out-of-the-box profile configuration. We have everything configured and then be able to offer in a solution. So maybe in the future, if there is the opportunity, we can come back again and talk to you about that. But hopefully today you learned a lot about what we offer and also the Nacha rule regulation requirements. And with that, I would like to thank you, all the participants, to join us today and hear what we have. Thank you.